Assalamu alaikum. Today on Nuran Academy, we discuss the flight of faith, the incredible story of Abbas Ibn Firnas. If you benefit, please support by subscribing and sharing as a sadaqah.
For most of human history, people would look up at the sky and see this beautiful but totally unreachable ceiling. The idea of flying up there with the birds, well, it wasn't just a wild dream. For a lot of people, it was pretty much madness. The sky belonged to the birds and the ground belonged to us. And that was just the way things were.
Now, to really get this, you have to understand it wasn't just about not having the right technology. It was a belief, a deep-seated belief in our own limitations. Falling from a great height meant certain death, so the unknown up there was a source of fear, not really a source of curiosity. Humanity had basically drawn a line in the sand, or, well, at the edge of the sky, and decided we don't cross that.
But here's where the Islamic tradition offers a completely different lens. Instead of fear, it actually encourages something called tafakkur, which is this deep, meaningful reflection on the signs of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all around us in creation. It doesn't call for us to just accept our limits blindly, but to actually try to question and understand the world. So where one worldview saw a hard stop, a barrier, the other saw a classroom.
And this brings us to one particular scholar in 9th century Andalusia who really took this principle to heart. He looked up at the very same birds that everyone else saw as a symbol of the impossible, and he chose to reflect. His name was Abbas Ibn Firnas. And he didn't see a limit. He saw a divine mechanism just waiting to be understood.
So how did he even begin to tackle this massive challenge? Well, his approach wasn't born from some reckless ambition. It came from a disciplined, scholarly curiosity, a genuine desire to understand how the Creator's work, well, works.
And this is so important to grasp. Ibn Firnas wasn't just a dreamer or some daredevil. He was a scientist, an inventor, a true polymath. He understood that to achieve something huge, you need to do the meticulous groundwork first. His dream of flying was balanced by his commitment to process and to reason.
And that diligence, that's really the key here. He didn't just slap some wings together and hope for the best. No, he deconstructed the entire concept of flight. He carefully studied the anatomy of a bird's wing. He watched and analyzed how they used invisible currents of air, and he made these painstaking calculations about lift and weight and balance. This was proper research, not just wishful thinking.
You see, this incredible, methodical approach, it's a perfect real-world example of a core Islamic principle, ihsan, excellence. It's this idea that a believer should strive to perfect their actions, whether it's an act of worship or their worldly work, as if they can see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for Ibn Firnas, his scientific rigor wasn't something separate from his faith, it was a direct extension of it.
So, after all that preparation, all the years of study, the calculations, the construction, it all comes down to a single historic moment, the moment of truth.
Let's set the scene. We're in Al-Andalus, which at the time was a shining beacon of knowledge and culture. A crowd starts to gather, probably a mix of curious onlookers, skeptics, and maybe a few supporters. All their eyes are fixed on a high cliff overlooking the city of Cordoba. Just try to picture it. Abbas Ibn Firnas, a man known for his sharp mind and his scholarship, is now standing there, about to perform an act of incredible physical courage. He carefully straps his creation, this frame of wood and silk, decorated with actual feathers, onto his own body.
All the math is done. All the research is finished. The only thing left to do is to take that leap of faith, a leap that was grounded in years of scientific study. And with everyone watching, he steps off the edge.
And can you believe it? For a few incredible, breathtaking moments, the impossible happens. He doesn't just fall, he glides, he actually soars. Now, it might not have been for a very long time, but it was real, observable flight, hundreds of years before the more famous attempts we hear about in the West. He proved it could be done.
But here's the thing. The story doesn't end with him up in the air. In many ways, you could argue the most important part of his journey happens when he comes back down to Earth.
So the landing was rough. He got hurt, but he survived. And what's the first thing he does? His scientific mind kicks right in, analyzing what went wrong. The crucial point wasn't that he fell, but what he did afterward. He reflected, and his conclusion was a game changer. He realized he had forgotten to build a tail. He figured out that birds use their tails to slow down and stabilize themselves for a safe landing.
And that, right there, that is the core of his legacy.
That hard landing wasn't proof that his dream was wrong. It was actually the final, critical piece of data in his experiment. It was a lesson, a powerful lesson, that would go on to inform the principles of aviation centuries later.
So you see, his story is so much more than just a cool piece of history. It's a timeless lesson in faith, in courage, and in the noble search for knowledge.
Just think about that for a second. The next time you see an airplane cutting through the clouds, remember that you are witnessing the fulfillment of a possibility that he was the first to really demonstrate. He opened a door in the human imagination and in the world of science that was never going to be closed again.
And his story shows us this perfect, crucial balance that is so central to our faith. It's a masterclass in Islamic character. His ambition was fused with the humility to study and learn from his own failure. His intellectual effort was, in itself, a form of worship. Without that sincerity and humility, ambition can just become arrogance, and worship can become an empty ritual.
Which brings us to the ultimate lesson here. In the eyes of his creator, the success wasn't in flying perfectly. The success was in the sincere, disciplined, and courageous effort itself. The outcome is always with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but the effort, that's on us to perfect.
His contribution was just profound. His willingness to risk failure, to actually learn from the fall, provided a foundation that future generations could build on, allowing them to reach ever greater heights.
And that's the challenge his story leaves for every single one of us. We might not be trying to literally conquer the skies, but we all have our own mountains to climb, our own perceived limits, our own fears of falling. His life asks us, what great effort for a higher purpose are you willing to undertake?
Presented and created by Neuron Studio.